are now tuning in to the Val Val Show, where conversation
Yeah.
is art, 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 art. Conversation is art, conversation is art. You should chime in, ain't no telling what to spark on the Val Val Show. Ain't no telling the Val Val Show. You know, ain't no telling where we go on the Val Val Show. Ain't no ceiling, cause the art of conversation is the flow. It's that creativity available when we speak, available in our homes, available in the streets. We just trying to get it sparking and take it a little deeper. Keep it casual while fireside chatting with our people. Yeah, we take it a little deeper. It get hot when we fireside chatting with our people. Cause conversation is art, conversation is art. You should chime in, ain't no telling what'll spark on the Val, the Val and Val Show, the Val and Val Show.
Hello, we're
Can you hear
here.
me? Can you hear me? Can you
Woo,
hear me?
y'all pray for us. Y'all pray for us tonight, okay?
I know, right? Good evening, Valerie.
It's good evening. How you doing? The
I'm
other
good. I'm
Val.
good. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Glad to have you here tonight on the Val and the Val Show. Conversation is what is
Art.
art. That's what it is. Conversation is art. And La Cherie, you're the first one to say hello to the people tonight. Thank you so much for
That's our
tuning
top
in.
fan.
Yeah, I know. Our top fan. We got to give you a flag or something. That says top fan. But everybody, we're so glad you all have joined in tonight. We have a very, very, very important discussion to have tonight. I think it's something that everyone is dealing with, whether we choose to admit it or not. Um, we all need some help in some way or another. So the Val and Val show tonight is bringing you good stuff, as we always do. And we hope that you're enlightened and blessed by what you will hear and the things that we will share. Valerie has lined up a very intellectual being tonight, and he is going to share with us things concerning mental health. Mental health. Dr. Demel Coleman came on some time back, and he chimed in on another show that we were doing. And so many of you out there were listening, asked if he would come back and do a show on his own. Well, Valerie, my co-host, has arranged for him to be here for us tonight. He's a very busy guy, and we appreciate him taking the time to share his knowledge and education with us as it relates to mental health. And listening, you too, me too, we too need to see therapists. Ladies typically will do it, but guys, we think that we're strong, we can handle it, all that kind of stuff. But I tell you, it's good to talk to somebody. It's really good to get a different perspective, even as a man. It does not lessen your manhood to go and sit and talk with someone. What it does, it enhances your manhood because it broadens your understanding of you and those around you. So tonight, we'll have a very serious conversation with Dr. Demel Coleman. Valerie, will you please introduce him?
I sure will. Hey y'all, first of all, I'm gonna say this. This is my frat brother, Phi Beta Sigma. Zeta Phi Beta. Blue.
I didn't know did I know he was a Sigma? Oh Lord.
Now, if you didn't know, now you know.
You're right. Now I know.
I wasn't gonna
You know,
tell you that.
I'm gonna tell you something
Anywho,
funny. Something funny happened last night. So I was talking about an Omega or the fraternity, and I said this guy here says he's an Omega, and then they found out he's really not. Then I said, I grew up with a guy somewhere down the line who said he was a Kappa, and we found out he wasn't. And the guy responded, "Well, folks don't ever say they're Sigmas."
okay. Are you trying to crack joke? Jamel, get him when you come on. We don't have to. The blue speaks for itself.
The blue
Speaks
speaks
for
for
itself.
itself. I hear
Anywho,
you.
anywho,
I just thought I'd share that
anyway,
with you.
let's move on before you end up with a traumatic head injury.
A closed head injury.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna do like the folks. I'm gonna bust it down to the white meat. It ain't gonna be closed.
To the white meat. To the white meat.
Yeah, but anyway, you all, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Demel Coleman. He is a graduate of the University of Alabama School of Medicine, 2001. So he didn't just start practicing, just in case you're wondering. Um, One of his great accomplishments was that he received the Lawland Fellowship, which is an award by the American College of Psychiatry to the top 15 prospective psychiatry residents in North America. So, you all, he's taken his career very serious. He's worked for Mary Stark Harper Center, the state's geriatric facility, for 15 years, and the co-medical director at Whitfield Regional. He's now with Project Horseshoe Farms, which provides services to individuals in rural Alabama, and we know that that is needed. As an activist, he started a program for inner city youth called the Southtown Project, and he ran that for 2 years before stepping aside because his children demanded that he be on the road traveling with them with all their sports. And then he made the decision to join the staff of Project Horseshoe Farms and run the outpatient clinic part-time in Malva. So welcome you all, my illustrious blue brother, Dr. Demel Coleman.
She
You know.
said the illustrious. The
Well,
illustrious.
That's
Well,
right.
all right. Well, all
I
right now.
appreciate it. Hey, you do know George Washington Carver was a Sigma, by the way.
Correct.
Just throwing that out
And
there.
Emmett
But,
Smith, just
and
throwing that
Bill
out there.
Rice, but just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
But
All right.
So now, welcome. You all, first of all, Dr. Coleman. And you all, first of all, let me apologize. First of all, I'm trying to be professional. Dr. Coleman, I'm trying to
That's
say,
right.
I'm so used to calling him DeMille, but I want to get, it's Dr. Coleman tonight. And you all, let's just put this out here. This is heavy tonight. And if you, on our flyer, we had, there's hope for hopelessness, finding hope in hopelessness. So we felt this was necessary because it's a hot topic. It's a hot topic, and we hear about it quite frequently. So, want everybody, for those of you who believe in prayer, be prayerful because it's a heavy topic. When you talk about mental illness anyway, it's a heavy topic because number one, it's so stigmatized. And just so I don't know if they're watching yet, but just so our other mental health people, I got on y'all shirt with Willow Grace Wellness, educate, eliminate, and eradicate mental health
Right.
stigma. And so Demille, we need to let you meet them for sure. So
Okay.
y'all can partner together. But anyway, we want to make sure that you all get good information. So this is going to be a little different tonight. Dr. Coleman is going to provide us some information. And then Valton and I will step in and kind of ask questions as he shares. So this is going to be kind of more like a lecture but it's the only way for you all to get this information and know what you can do as well. Okay? So, Dr. Coleman, take it away.
Well,
Good
I
way,
appreciate you, and I definitely say this is one of these topics we need to be definitely mindful of because when I went through residency, it was unheard of for blacks to really have issues with suicide. It just was a non-starter. And if you look historically, I think I've provided that to my sorrow about the CDC study. Back in 1950s, you're talking about Reconstruction, Jim Crow, civil rights. When the CDC looked at suicides, what they saw is a straight shot for white males, then it was white females, and down near the zero was black males and females. Now, this is in 1950, and here we are in 2022, mind you. And from the period of 91 to 2017, I want you to hear me. Suicide has increased 182%. That's 182%. And our little girls, 13 to 19, 182%. And our boys, it has increased 60% in that same time frame. I mean, it was so bad that Congress took it up. Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman from New Jersey, they have a commission that they put on this whole matter. It was called Ring the Alarm, the Crisis of Black Youth Suicide in America. In December of 2019, 73% increase from the period of 1991 to 2017 in suicides in our kids. And just think about this. We never used to hear about suicide. And now we're at the point where if you hear about a kid committing suicide, it's twice as likely that it's a black kid.
Wow.
That's scary. And that's something we're not talking about. And to add to that problem, you got to think about it. For black men, that rate has doubled as well from 1980 to now. For women, it's gone up 50% from the year 2000 to 2016. We're talking about serious, serious consequences. Like you talk about the song self destruction, we are truly self destructing, and nobody's saying nothing. Nobody. And for me, it's really alarming when I hear of these little kids killing themselves. And, I don't go into tangents about how people die because that can actually increase the risk of that being done. But I do want to say this. If you are a gun owner, I believe in the Second Amendment right, but if you are a gun owner, know this. The vast majority of deaths in these kids are from self-inflicted gunshot wounds by these little kids. 90% fatality. So if you have a gun, great, lock it up. You have to lock it up with these kids. Every time you turn on the TV, I just saw a situation the other day, so I'm not going into detail. Please lock up your firearms if you have kids. I get it. But also, we keep hearing in the news, and I kind of have issues with the news on this matter. They always are broadcasting celebrity deaths, but there's been several studies that show by talking about it, you increase the likelihood in the first 28 days of increasing suicide by 18 to 30%.
Wow.
And here's the even scarier part. Within that same time frame, the type of suicide, up to 44% will use the exact same method. So why are we sensationalizing something that leads to tragic results? For what? So, and I'm not trying to leave it there because I think the thing for me that the reason I want to talk about this, because the whole premise is hope. We need to understand that there are things that we can do. There are ways that we can intervene, and we have to be more mindful, all of us. One of the number one risk factors for suicide in the elderly and the kids is loneliness. Loneliness. Here it is. We live in a society now where we are the most disconnected in all of history, yet we're the most connected in all of history. And that's some serious tragedy right there. Shakespeare couldn't have come up with a better play. I mean, that's horrible. And you think about it. We sit in, and the people who are the most lonely are the people who are heavy social network users, the social media people. 73% of them in a survey said that they felt lonely. And when you think about the elderly, if an elderly person is lonely, they have an increase of 45% likelihood for mortality. 45%. 45. That's almost half. And loneliness is not just them, though. Even though we're focusing on those two with that risk factor, adults, 63%, us males, 63% have issues of loneliness. Young adults, 61%. Women, 55%. And why is loneliness a major factor? Well, you have to look at historically, and I'll try to make sure I use scientific words so I don't upset anybody on either side, but I'll say it this way. Our ancestors, when they were in Africa, the way they survived is they came together. You could not survive if you were not part of the clan, if you're not part of the tribe. A death sentence back then was being ostracized from your clan. That was a death sentence. They've done studies on loneliness, and what they do, they will take the saliva on people who have chronic loneliness, and what they found is that this hormone that registers stress is extremely elevated. It's elevated to the same degree as it would be if you were physically attacked. Now imagine that. Being lonely chronically is the same as far as your body's concerned as being physically attacked. And that's the kind of culture we're living in. That's the kind of culture we're bringing up our kids in. And nobody's saying anything about it. I had a family night with my own family. We watched The Social Dilemma. I would tell every parent that's listening and anybody that you know to make sure y'all watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix. This is getting way out of hand, and nobody's speaking up about it. Nobody. We're silent. And our silence is resulting in just unquestionable death that's just unspeakable. And so for me, this is a very serious topic because I just don't understand how nobody's speaking about this. I just don't. And so when we think about loneliness, here's some other things. You're 2 to 3 times more likely to die. They've done studies where they say loneliness is the equivalent of issues of obesity. If you're chronically lonely, that's the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15 cigarettes a day is the equivalent of being lonely. What are we going to do about this? Too many people are addicted. We say the adults can step up, but adults check their phones about 85 to 87 times a day. We're stuck on our phones. Your kids, if you look at your screen time on your kids, I did it to mine and I was appalled. I had to check myself. Your teenagers from 13, 18 probably got 9 hours of social media time, 8 to 12, 6 hours. That's a lot of time spent on social media being bombarded with a very negative mindset. You know, advertisers spent $240 billion to convince us that we are inefficient or deficient and we need something to make us feel whole. $240 billion. And that's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against neuroscientists who are sitting here trying to tell us that there's something wrong with us so we can buy a product.
Dr. Coleman, let me ask you that because for me, for myself, what I've done, I've intentionally pulled back from Facebook was my only social media on TikTok and all that and tweeting out. But what I actually did before even just getting to the point of I actually set a time, Facebook now I guess with all the hype, you can actually have a alarm that pops up. If you give yourself an hour a day or 2 hours, it'll let you know. Now you can always ignore it if you choose to. Being the fact that adults are addicted to it and not just on a personal thing, because I think of me, I think about from work, email. Okay, the mail comes to my home 6 days a week,
Yep.
once a day. Email comes to my email when I'm at work. I can't even keep up with it. And
No.
much of it is about nothing,
Yeah.
honestly. So it seems like you said we're headed for self-destruction. It seems that these things we thought were going to make life more convenient have also made us at risk.
Yes.
That's just, but the key thing you said is money is being made. So you say, ask about why nobody's talking about it. That's why, because they're making money.
Yeah.
So what can we do to advocate for changes?
Well, see, that's where, like I brought up the social dilemma. In our home, we watched that movie and we had an honest conversation in our home. We had to cut back on social media time. Like Monday through Thursday, that's not time to be on your phones. You know, we got to limit that. We try to limit the exposure. When we go out to dinners, there's no phones at the dinner. We sit and talk. You know, I got that from Michelle Obama back in the day, and we implemented it in our household, and it makes a difference. You know, one of the funniest stories, my daughter plays travel softball, and we would go to different places and we would go out to eat, and they were at the table, and she got up and she went around and took everybody's phone and said, "We're going to talk." That's where it starts. We have to take ownership of it. And so for those of us that are very active, that's wonderful. But here's the problem. There's a huge proportion of people who are not.
Mm.
And the worst people to be in this position are those kids that are in our welfare system, those kids that are in single homes and in poverty. Those are the kids that are 5 times more likely to commit suicide. Those are the kids that have increased issues of loneliness. See, here's the thing, and I guess that will segue into the next topic is, you know, when we talk about risk factors, many people say, well, mental health is a risk factor. It is. But in many ways, mental health diagnosis is a canary in the coal mine. It's speaking to something more serious. And
Mm.
many of us that say, oh, they're depressed or they got this, and that explains it. How does that explain it? Life events explain it. See, here's the facts and what people don't know. There is not a specific gene that causes depression or anxiety. There's not. We always talk about chemical imbalance. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there is no truth to the myth of a chemical imbalance. There is deficiencies, there are things that we can correlate, but those are correlations, not causations. And that's a whole nother topic. But basically what I'm saying is we don't even know for fact what's causing. We know it's the correlation. The brain is neuroplastic. That means it adjusts. So if you have enough stress that happens to your brain, it will adjust to the stress. People who are lonely, they have increased issues of paranoia and psychosis. Their brains begin to shut down. That's what happens to them under so much stress. And they've done studies. And here's the scary part. They've done studies with, they were looking at people with severe obesity. And they had this study with like 17,000 people. It's called the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And they had 17,000 people. And what they found when they was looking for obesity, what they found is people with obesity, depression, and anxiety, 68% of them had childhood trauma. That's 7 out of 10 had childhood trauma.
Wow.
So which came first, the chicken or the egg? And here's the point that I'm making. If we say it's all about a chemical imbalance and we give somebody a pill, but we don't deal with the deeper issues, it's like a fireman going to a fire and being focused on the smoke. He's sitting here blowing the smoke away and increasing the flames on the home. That's what we're doing in many regards. We're not tackling the deeper issues that these people are dealing with. You know, they do a study where basically if you had childhood trauma and they got these categories, if you check off 7 items on this childhood trauma category, you know what your likelihood of committing suicide is? 3,100. 3,100% increase in your chances of committing suicide if you check off 7 items on the trauma index. But nobody's talking about that. We're more focused on the diagnosis of depression, the diagnosis of anxiety. But what about the childhood trauma that's being ignored? And this is what I mean when we get caught up and people put these lists of the Columbia suicide scale and all these scales that we can say these things matter, but we stop there. It's like putting a Band-Aid on an aneurysm. There's a lot more to this. And services need to go much, much deeper. And they're not. And that's my concern. When I talk to my clients, you know, I have some that don't come back because I'll tell them, I say, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I agree that you got these issues, but let's get you on some medicine to help you. But once we help you, here's the deal. You need to start dealing with those issues you haven't dealt with. You got to.
Dr. Coleman, let me ask you this question because I see that, you know, I lead some small groups at church and it's almost taboo. I mean, to get someone to open up about their upbringing. And we are a product of it. Myself, I mean, if I had to rate my overall childhood B plus A minus, but even in my adulthood, I had to realize, ooh, that wasn't good. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't so much intentional things, but it was learned behaviors or, as you say, coping mechanisms, you know, that they dealt with their trauma. And it led to some very candid conversations with me and my parents to talk about these things being real. And of course, my parents were of the what they call the greatest generation and very hard to. But once we started talking about those things, it really just, I mean, it's almost like you can take a big inhale and just, and exhale and just feel a weight, you know, because if you don't deal with it, you move on. So we
don't
always
really
hear
move
what
on,
happens
though.
in the house, stay in the house.
But you don't really move on. There's a
Not
really
about
good.
for is healing. I mean, going through the process, you
Oh yeah,
acknowledge it. That's what I'm talking
Oh
about.
yeah.
But we get taught what happens in the house stays in the house.
Yes.
So what do we need to do to generate these conversations?
Well, see, here's the problem. Unfortunately, we're living in a time where people don't really develop meaningful relationships. They are more, and see, and here's people can say whatever they want to, but if you look at the Black culture in the 50s, they had tons of harsh things that they were facing, but those harsh things drove them closer. So there's a difference, and they've done studies. Our mindset has become more extrinsically focused, and that means on materialism.
Okay.
than intrinsically focused. That is the heart of a whole lot of our problems right there. We have shifted to embrace a culture of more, 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 more. They've done studies on this. And this guy, his name is Tom Kessler. He's one of the first ones to actually pay attention to this. And he did it with some college students. I think it was 316. And what he realized it's called the aspiration index. And what he tracked was those people that had goals that were intrinsic, and those intrinsic is I want to be a better person, I want to be a better father, I want to improve. So things that have meaning. He tracked those versus stuff. I need to have this, I need to have that job, I need to have this kind of income to make it. And here's what he found. The more materialistic you were, the more depressed you were. And he's like, maybe that's an aberration. So then he takes that same study and gets 218-year-olds, same results. It's like, wow, maybe I'm getting on to something. Then he goes and takes older people, 192, same results, same results. They've done throughout all countries increase of these studies on intrinsic versus extrinsic focus, and depression and anxiety was off the roof. And then somebody decided, well, is something else maybe going to be affected? So then they got them to do diaries, mood diaries, to track all of the different things. And guess what they found? The more materialistic you were, not only did you have issues with depression, not only did you have issues with anxiety, not only did you have issues with substance abuse, but guess what? You also had physical problems, high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease. So our focus on extrinsic values is killing us. And we got people working jobs, and they done a study. You know how many people enjoy their jobs? 13%.
Wow.
So we got people working jobs to get stuff that doesn't even make them happy. They're working themselves to death to get stuff that doesn't even make them happy.
Right. Hey, DeMel, let's take a station break real quick if you don't
Yes,
mind,
sir.
please. Ladies and gentlemen, you have tuned in to Conversation is Art, the Val and Val Show, and we are enjoying a very educational conversation with Dr. DeMel Coleman, psychiatric medicine, and he is a smart guy. I'm sitting here listening at him rattle off all these statistics and talking about people, things, they know, whatever. And I'm like, this dude is heavy. So let me step out of the way. Thank you all for joining. Dr. Coleman, take it away.
All right. So here's the reason I want to bring all this stuff up, because I don't want to be, as they say, a Debbie Downer. I want us to understand what we're dealing with, because I'm kind of from the country. There's an old saying that says you can't get right until you first get real. We got to get real. We
I like
have an
that.
addiction problem to stuff. And in the Black culture, that's even worse. You know, they did a Nielsen study. I don't know if y'all looked at it in 2021. You know who's the number one consumer? We are. Once again, 2020, 1.57 trillion. 2021, 1.066 trillion. How are we spending so much stuff on external things? There's a disconnect. And we can sit here and say, well, that comes from slavery. But how did our ancestors in the 50s have a different mindset? See, there's a report in the late 60s called the Moynihan Report. I'm not going to go too far because I'm trying to stay on point. But that report showed that from the time of 1950s, with good intentions of, trying to do welfare reform, great society, and different things, and all these freedoms, what they saw was a doubling of the number of kids being brought up in single-parent homes. And Moynihan said, if the Black family doesn't stop this is going to derail all the progress they made.
Wow.
Guess what? 71% of our kids today are being brought up in single-parent homes. And here's some ugly statistics. They're 5 times more likely to commit suicide. There's 5 times. 70% of the gang members, guess where they come from? Single-parent homes. 70% of your high school dropouts, guess where they come from? Single-parent homes. 70% of these suicides we're talking about, guess where they come from? Single-parent homes. 70% of the problems with substance abuse, guess where they come from? Single-parent homes. 70% of the inmates in the juvenile centers, single-parent homes. 80% of all prison inmates, when they studied them, they had one common factor. They came out of a single-parent home. We're not talking about these issues. And We as a people need to understand that this is not their problem. This is our problem, because these are our kids that are being subject to some of the most horrendous aspects of society, because they're being started off behind the eight ball. And what can we do? Well, one of the things I'm trying to do, and that's what I talked to Valerie about, is we have to be honest. Those of us who are in a position, we need to be mentoring. Those of us who are in a position, we need to get in these schools and start tutoring. We gotta spend so much time in the arena getting dirty that we don't know what's going on in the stands.
Mm.
And unless we are willing to do that, and here's the thing that I say, I know we can, because you're looking at a people who, after slavery, 50 years after slavery, where we were mostly illiterate, 50 years after slavery, the church, the community leaders turned a situation from mostly illiterate to mostly literate. Those are our ancestors. We're talking about our ancestors who, when they got locked out of areas, they created their own communities. They created their own banks. Those are our ancestors. We're talking about our ancestors who, when they couldn't go to public schools, guess what? They created their own, Dunbar. And who came from Dunbar? Charles Drew. Who came from Dunbar? Thurgood Marshall. And I'm not saying we don't need policies to change. I'm saying we can't sit on our hands waiting on policies to change while there's blood in the streets with our kids and our own. All of us have to get involved. The churches need, as I like to say, reclaim their soul. They used to be the cornerstone in the community.
Yep.
We need all hands on deck right now, because if we don't, this self-destruction is only going to get worse. We got to start being involved, like the nursing homes. There are people who care about these elderly people who sitting here lonely. Go visit them. I've worked in nursing homes, and I've gone in there, and I've seen people who have not had one or two visitors in the whole time I'll go there. I work in a geriatric facility, and I can tell you there is countless number of clients that I have here who have not had one family visitor, not one. That's not the culture I grew up in.
Right.
The culture I grew up in, my grandparents died at home. The culture I grew up in, there was a lady called Mother Hudson that lived beside my grandmother. We had to take food to Mother Hudson. The culture I lived in, Con Nelly, Con Bessie, when they got old, we had to take food to them. We took care of our own. Right now, we're chasing the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And we're losing our souls.
Okay.
So for me, there are easy things. If we look on history, see, I'm not asking us to do something that hasn't been done. I'm asking us to get back to our roots, get back to loving one another, getting to know your neighbors, spending time to know your neighbor, and those are simple things we can do. And there are bigger things, like the mental health centers need to be more active. Like these urban schools, we need people getting involved in these urban schools, because these urban schools need more funding, because they need more mental health services, because these kids are the most vulnerable. They need more help. And they're getting none. What we're doing, we're saying, oh yeah, they're getting in more trouble. They're the problems. So we're blaming a kid who is growing up in a horrible situation for being a distraction in school. I get it. Something has to be done to that kid. I get it. You can't let them disrupt the school. But who's going into the home to figure out why this kid became who he became?
Well, Dr. Coleman, let me ask you this, because
Yes.
one of the things, we get ready to build, what do they call, mega prisons. We have money for that, but why don't we have the money for the school programs, invest in them not going to prison? However, we know that's MONEY too, and because prisons are privatized. So what I'm hearing you say, there's a call for us as a Black race. We have got to be on these legislative people, these politicians demanding things. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it. Black people, stop voting for Black people who've been somewhere for 25, 30 years, who have done absolutely nothing. And you know who they are.
Yep.
If they are not serving your purpose, you need to vote them out. And I think that's one of our critical bad decisions we made. We so tied to this. I mean, come on. We need to put people in that are going to fight for us. And in the words my mom used to say, if you put them in the first time and they don't do nothing, don't give them a second chance. Take them right out. Don't even re-elect them. because they should have been prepared. So let me ask you this. We don't have a lot of mental health resources in schools.
No,
I personally, definitely not in healthcare. I
no.
mean, not like it should be. Because I believe this, if we could deal with the mental health issue, the physical illnesses that we develop would be very minimum.
Yes.
So, what type of things can we do or that you know of to try to bring mental health to the forefront? And like you say, making sure these kids get screened for trauma to see what's going on in their life. I'll share this. My daughter went to a Birmingham City School one time. Well, she went to a Birmingham City School 3 years, but one was a what do you call it?
A magnet school.
A magnet school,
hmm
and the other one was not, which that bothered me greatly. Why do we have two different school systems? Because that means you got an expectation of the folks over here at the magnet school, and you throw all the resources, and you really don't have an expectation for success of these kids in the other neighborhood. But I let my daughter go to the school, and as you said, I was amazed. I think back then, and this was in 2004, over 50% of those kids were living in alternative home environments with grandparents,
hmm
a good friend that had
hmm
taken them in, that didn't want them to go into the system.
hmm
And in some cases, the kids that were at home, these were middle school kids that were
hmm
actually being moms and dads to their elementary or younger
hmm
students. And what I saw, I will say this at this school, those teachers altered their schedules
hmm
and made sure those kids had food when they came in. They had one kid, which broke my heart. They would let him take a nap in the morning because he lived in a drug house.
hmm
And he stayed up all night to watch over his little sister.
hmm
So they would let him sleep. And they actually stayed after school to keep him up with his lesson. And I know people say, well, that's not my responsibility. But I remember growing up, school was a safe haven.
Yeah.
It was a place that where teachers identified things, they got resources and tried to intervene. And now teachers need help. They need social workers in these schools. And as you said, if we look and see the parents not involved, then we got to step in and be that parent. I know for me recently, I just got back to business. I'm a mentor at George Washington Carver over there. So some kids can see me, poor
hmm
girl from South Alabama. You can make it. This don't
Yep.
have to be your plight. And talk a little bit about how poverty ties into the mental health issue as well as possible the suicide rate.
Well, here's the thing on poverty. They go hand in hand. I mean, you're talking about when you talk about trauma, you're talking about low socioeconomic status. When these kids, it's a cycle. They've done a study, and I think it was Harvard did a study. And here's three. See, I want to be more on a positive note. I'm gonna give us a positive thing we can look at on this one. That if you are in abject poverty, and they did this with millennials, 97% of the millennials that did three things. They graduated, they didn't have a baby before they had a career, they didn't have a baby before they got married. They escaped poverty.
Mm.
Why aren't we teaching these values anymore? Why are we quiet? See, we're gonna always have a losing battle if we don't close up the hole at the bottom of the bucket.
Mm.
So you're talking about dumping resources in. I'm not going to name places, but I went and tutored somewhere. And I will tell you that the kids that I helped, their level of understanding of education was where my kids were 5-6 years from where they are right now. And it's going to be virtually impossible to put those level of kids into a magnet school. Those other kids need to be separated, not so they're separated, so that we can identify they need more help.
Yeah.
I don't want them going to magnet school. I want them getting more help, get more resources. I want them to get more resources in their homes to help these kids have an opportunity, because, we need to get to a place to where, at least for me, when I think about those issues of poverty, that's why I went in there, because I want to talk to these kids. I want to help them to understand that you don't have to continue this cycle. You don't. And I think the churches really need to, and I'm going to say something that you know, I guess I've gotten older and I've read too much. But when I get these young people that come in my office now that's dealing with depression and all this stuff, the vast majority of these women got three and four kids, two to four kids. You know, the average black person has 3.4 kids. And I just told you that the vast majority of these kids are in a single parent home. You know how much they say statistically it costs to raise a kid from 0 to 18? $240,000. So what single parent gonna have $720,000 from birth to 18 for their three kids? Where you get those funds from? I mean, just being real. So I think we need to increase funding to help address twofold. We got to help these kids. We also got to help the parents. We got to help them to get to a place, because I'm gonna tell you, we can give pie in the sky, but if you got 3 and 4 kids and you're single, it's gonna be really impossible, almost impossible for you to get out of that hole.
Right.
And I have honest conversations with my clients about acceptance and about making the best at where they are, because they're thinking that somehow they can find this man that's going to be there for them. Well, here's the problem with that. These women that have multiple kids, they're more susceptible to finding a guy that's going to prey on their kids. And nobody's talking about that. These kids are twice as likely to be abused by boyfriends and guys that are coming in and out of these homes.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, Dr. Coleman. So the men in these equations, what's up with them?
Oh, a lot of them in jail.
Fathering the children. That's the problem. Okay.
And they're having kids. And that's why, for me, the whole conversation I talked about with the boy crisis, we got to have men to be involved. You know, this guy, Harold Pollack, he's in Chicago. He did a program, and he had an after-school program where he got the kids involved in work study and mentoring. Guess what? Violence dropped drastically just from having a job, just from having somebody to speak to them. You know, one of my friends here in Birmingham, I forgot to put that on. That there was a year in between when I left my program. I'm like, well, I still want a mentor, so I went and joined Aspire Movement with Jason Williams, a minister over there. And this kid I was ministering, and he was a CD student. He was a good kid though. His grandmama was raising. It was 5 of them. 5. His grandmama, who had diabetes, was raising. And she barely getting around, and she got knee babies, as they say in the country. And so my wife and I, you know, we really got involved, started talking to him, bringing him over, taking stuff over for everybody. And his grades improved. And I was talking to his grandmother. I ain't say nothing hateful, but I just was honest with her about the situation she was in. And sometimes, you know, too many people want to go in and give people advice. But if you ain't developed relationship, you need to keep your mouth shut.
Right.
So I'm not telling us to go out here and tell people to pull up their boots. No, I'm telling you to get your hands dirty, helping people, mentor, tutor, get involved. And once you develop relationships, then start speaking some truth in love and help people stop continuing down the path. We got to help women know you don't need to be having any more babies. You don't. And here's what poverty comes in on that too, Val. You know, they've done studies where the younger you are and the more impoverished you are, the more impact it has on your cognitive abilities. Because you get poor nutrition, you have increased stress that impacts a child's mental development. And you know what that correlates to? How well they're going to do in school, how well they're going to do on these tests. How well they do on these tests correlates on what quality of life they're going to have later in life. So we're starting off behind the 8 ball when we don't say to these young girls, hey, and here's my saying to my folks that once they get to know me, I say, I know you love them, but if you really love them, don't have another.
Makes sense.
So, you know, so we got to get back to like the old folks in the church. Them old ladies in the church will walk around. If you came in there and you didn't have the right clothes on, they will let you know. And they weren't letting you know in a hateful way. They were doing it. Well, some of them were hateful. Let me
Right. You're right.
but I'm just saying we need to be advocating for better policies to offset the horrible situation these kids are in.
Well, Dr. Coleman, it seems like so. What to me, what I'm hearing you saying, definitely for the children, we've got to have some type of mental health screening or trauma screening as early as elementary school.
Yes.
Now, so we know that. What about us grown folks?
Well,
We 20, 30, 40, 50.
60.
What how do 60 how do we get us in a space to realize it's okay not to be okay and to let some of these skeletons out these closets
well,
so
see
that
what
you can be healed
well,
and
see, this
start
is
working
where
toward healing.
yeah, well, this is exactly where my whole conversation with telling people, I don't want to hear about your diagnosis. I want to hear about you.
Okay.
And so when I hear their stories and they tell me their stories, what I tell them, I said, I hear what you're saying, but do you know you were conditioned? You were conditioned to be who you are. And I give them see, they believe this blank slate. I don't believe in blank slate. I get a little personal so people can understand what I mean. Because it's one thing to be theoretical, it's another thing to be practical. So I give a case in point. I'll say, I grew up in a home where, my dad was Superman. My mom, she was tough as nails, tough as nails. And I was petrified of her. And a situation happened in my home, and I'm not going to do it on here because they may be listening, that our parents ended up being in a divorce, and it was very traumatic. There was alcoholism involved. Just put it that way. And we can all assume what happened. And I was the oldest. And guess what that meant for me? I still remember this story just like it was yesterday. I had come home and I had the gloves from playing, and this is what I tell my clients. I had the gloves from being ready to be a starting football player. And my mom picks me up and we're struggling at this point. She says, I got your job starting Saturday. Now, I never
Mm.
filled out an application. And here I am elated to tell her I'm finna start with my best friends. You know what I did? I shut up. Why? Because I had to step up and man up. But here's what that did for me. You know what that taught me? My feelings don't matter. I have to put
Mm.
others first. So I go through my life always putting others first. And that's what I tell
Wow.
my clients. We've all been conditioned in one way or the other. What's your conditioning? Because your conditioning greatly impacts what's being presented in your life with all your kind of health issues. And see, it's not when people talk about abuse, people think sexual abuse. No, no. You know what the most devastating type of abuse is?
Yeah.
The type of abuse associated with neglect, abandonment, and just flat out cruelty, not sexual. Those are
Mm.
the ones that have the highest rate of association with depression, anxiety, loneliness, obesity. Those, the ones we say, it wasn't too bad. Let's just brush that one under the rug. No, what that does, it erodes a sense of one's self being. So when I talk to my clients, I say, look, I had to work on me. And I sit on this chair to help you. What are you going to do? See, here's what I tell people. How you were conditioned because of what happened to you is like the computer. When you cut on the computer, there's a font that's automatically on the computer. You don't change it. It comes on automatically. Your upbringing created a font for you. And that's how you see the world. We all have
Mm.
confirmation biases. How we see ourselves is how we see the world. We bring into our stratosphere everything that is hidden inside of us. And unless you deal with that, you're going to keep finding people in abusive relationships. And when I tell people, when I get clients that tell me they're embarrassed about being in an abusive relationship, I said, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. I said, here's what that tells me. Maybe you're starting to realize there's something I need to address because I keep attracting these bad men.
Mm.
You see, we somehow do this blame game instead of taking the step of we couldn't control what happened to us, but we can control what we decide to do with that. And so I give my clients homework when they come see me. Like it's like in school. So I talk to them about books to really help them to understand that it's not the major abuse issues. It's all these little slights that your sibling was favored over you. That impacts a kid. One kid had sickness, and so you were the bigger kid, so you you understood that, so you allowed the family to focus more on that kid. But guess what happens to you? You were not noticed. You were neglected. Now nobody's gonna say that, but that's what happened to a kid. As an adult, yeah, we can always look back and have 2020. But from a kid's perspective, all kids are narcissistic. The world revolves around them. And here's how you have to understand that. In order for a species to survive, you just imagine you're a kid and your house is hell. If the people who brought you in the world, if the people who's supposed to love you unconditionally treat you like trash, what does that say for the rest of the world? I wouldn't want to leave the house. So a survival mechanism is for a child to take ownership of all the chaos in his home as being his fault. Because if it's his fault, then he can control it. But the problem with that is they take that for the rest of their life. And so I try to get clients to say, hey, you need to do some deep dives and figure out, because nobody's immune. No parent is perfect. No parent is perfect. So whatever your blind spots are, those blind spots are affecting you. And so like I told Val, I don't know if she got the list, like Complex PTSD by Pete Walker. Tell them,
Yeah,
hey,
I just put them in the chat.
Yeah.
You know, those books are like my go-to books to tell people to start looking inside of themselves. And when
Valencia McCarroll added one too. What Happened to You? That Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey.
Okay.
Book, yeah.
And once you can really, and see, here's the thing, as far as understand mental illness, and don't get me wrong, I prescribe meds. I'm not against meds. So I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is too many times we use medications as if it's supposed to numb us. And it numbs us not to deal with the hard truths. And that's why when I get clients and I tell them, I say, hey, we can go your route. We can change your medicine. But here's the deal. If in the next year or two, we've switched you 6 more times, maybe you'll think about looking deeper. When you see somebody with 12 and 13 pills, it's not the pills. It's not the pills.
Wow. Oh, goodness, time has flown. Look, Dr. Coleman, so as I told you earlier, you're just going to have to become a regular guest. Because really, we got to say it and say it again. And the therapists that own Willow Grace Wellness Center are on here, Tan Jamaica and Valencia McCarroll Pruitt. They say, this is their shirt, y'all. It says, educate, eliminate, eradicate, end mental health stigma. So we got to keep talking about it. The more we talk about it, the more we normalize that it's okay to mention it. And look, I told Dr. Coleman, look, we're going to let him have some closing words after. We got to have some music because there's some heavy stuff that we don't deal with tonight. So you all heard our jingle, our Conversation is Art jingle by Miss Shy Speak. So I'm going to play one of her songs because we need to process. So y'all be processing, and then Dr. Coleman gonna close us out with a charge and some great word that we can sleep on the night, because this was.
And before he closes out, I want to make a request. So we'll make the request after the song.
Yeah, this was some heavy stuff, y'all. Okay, it was heavy. Okay, that's what it was.
Wake up, everybody. No more sleeping in bed. Ooh. Yeah. Ooh. Listen. Okay, Lord, I really wanna know who you think we are, fooling silly. Less than I realize we are schooling Billy, Brittany and Braxton. I took that assessment from how we are acting, cause we lacking compassion for each other. So quick to cancel a sister or a brother. We just be approaching our problems with petty, and we are not ashamed. We celebrated confetti in front of the next gen like we don't know we modeling. Negative emotions our future leaders are bottling. Stuff that can't save them, asses what we gave them. Nothing to lean on, just defeat like an ottoman. Great easy, but I know we can make it right. If only we can wake up the teachers to shine a light. I asked the Lord what it would have to be. He guided me to inner peace. I said, wake up,
everybody. No more sleeping in bed.
no more sleeping.
No more backwards thinking. Time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war and poverty.
Okay, I started thinking a little deeper and discovered that it's way too many secrets we keep covered. And I ain't talking about exposing what's dark, but exposing what's right. If we want to spark a spike or an upswing in what we see in our society, undeniably share the truth like a diary for everybody to read. Give everybody a seed. We all water each other, then everybody succeed. It sounded like a dream, don't it? But I can't help it that I'm optimistic. I want the teacher to incite the people for a future that is not ballistic. Problems ahead like Medusa, but all we need is a real solution. I asked the Lord what it would have to be. He guided me to inner peace. I said, wake up,
everybody. No more sleeping in bed. No more backwards thinking. Time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war and poverty. I said, wake up, everybody. No more sleeping in bed. No more backwards thinking. Time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war and poverty. Won't you help me? Won't you help me? Won't you help me understand your plan? Me to another land, make me forget all that hurts me. Let me understand. Take me home, take me home.
give everybody a seed.
Home. Take me
We all water each other, then everybody succeed. Give everybody a seed. Give everybody a seed. We all water each other, then everybody succeed.
All right, so we're back on.
Yes.
Doc,
Had to have a little up, had to have a little pick me up.
Yeah.
That was a great song.
Yeah, it is. And I was gonna tell you what it is. Shy, the music you hear, it's on her experience, you know, and she don't mind me
okay.
sharing this. She's gone to therapy, childhood trauma. So her musical career, spoken word lyrics are about speaking life and letting people know you can make it. You know, she was saying if we all want to succeed, if we help each other. So she's awesome. So just love it. So I just wanted to give y'all something positive to sleep on. So I think Valton, you say you had something you wanted to.
Yeah, so Doc, what I've noticed over the years is that when people have more time on their hands, they tend to get into more trouble. And the Bible speaks of it. It says, idle mind is the devil's workshop, right?
Yeah.
So what's the probability of you doing three things for us this year? One, coming on right before the children get out for spring break. Two, coming on to speak to us before the children get out for summer break. And lastly, coming on during the Christmas break, because that's a real depressing time for a lot of young people as well. And what I will do, I'll reach out to Dr. Mark Sullivan and have him to put it out into the Birmingham school systems, as well as Dr. Walt Gonsolin to put it in Jefferson County and tell them to tune in to a very important segment that will help our youth spring break, summer, and Christmas break. Just give that some thought, if you will, please.
I'll give that some thought.
Okay.
I have to talk with the real boss though.
Hey, Dr. Coleman.
It's a Thursday night. Tell the boss to come over.
Hey, Dr. Coleman, someone wants to get your contact information, email.
They can get my name. It's DemelColeman@gmail.com.
Okay, real simple, huh?
Yes.
I'm putting it in the chat. Well, this has been
Now, I will say this though. There's some posts I do through this on different things of depression, anxiety. and stuff like that for my clients that I send out. That's that's like a Facebook post form. So what I'll do is I'll email you, or I'll text the post to you, Valerie,
Okay.
because it basically is like it goes over different issues that most of my clients face. And in the comments section, I break it up into, I have videos, books, resources that my clients can go to use when they're not seeing me, because, you know, I see my job as really as the halftime coach. When
Okay.
you get out, when you leave me, you got to live it. And living it means putting it in an application. So, but I'll send those different things and I'll put the title for it. I got one on grief, depression,
Okay.
anxiety, uh, death, you know, different things,
Mm-hmm.
so that people can see.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
we
I've
help you.
enjoyed. I've been educated. I mean, when you sent those stats, I was like, "Woo!" I had to stop and pray. I was like, "Lord Jesus," and it's just, and of course, we didn't even talk about to the COVID. So we know
Oh
what you
yeah,
shared. COVID has magnified it. Just know
there's a
that,
study
y'all.
on that, of course,
So
and the
listen,
Harvard
if he
study
said
shows that.
70%, you might want to just bump it up 10%
Yes.
with COVID and everything. So we thank you, and
Yes,
definitely
indeed.
gonna have you back just to keep it in the forefront. And as always, Valencia and Tangi, definitely gonna have you all back. We're gonna share your information. If you didn't see it, um, Willow Grace Wellness on their Facebook page, Valencia did a great thing on self-care.
Mm.
So we tagged it. I posted on our page. You know, we're sharing this information because name of our show is Conversation is Art. This is a definitely a conversation that we need to have. It's good for the music and all the fun stuff we do, but we have to stop and have these serious conversations because, as Dr. Coleman said, if we don't start saving us, as you can see, you all, there's no legislator being said. You know, as a matter of fact, we're battling to stay where we are. So we got to fight for our kids, for ourselves as well, and deal with our mental health issues. And it's not a bad thing. We all have them. If you think about it, and I like to share this, you know, Jesus, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, y'all, that was a mental health issue going on right there. He didn't want to go to that cross, okay? He had that flesh moment. It was like, woo, not today. And the way they described that, y'all, every neuron in his body was on fire, was reacting to that thing. So
Not my
listen,
will, but your will.
so look, I'm gonna free y'all from some. When people tell you can't
Yeah.
show your emotions,
Right.
yes you can. Jesus did. So tell them they're wrong. They are wrong. So let me read some of the comments. It said this was an absolutely awesome show. So much necessary information. And of course, you got your mental health colleagues, Tangi and Valencia, they're like, absolutely. They don't ditto a lot of stuff you talked about. Uh, and my sister, love her, she dropped into the chat about Dr. Sandra D. Wilson, Hurt People, Hurt People.
Okay.
That's a good book. I've actually read that one. So you all utilize these resources. I tell people this, we love to say knowledge is power. No, it's not. Knowledge utilized in its proper way is power, because we can know a lot of things and still be stuck. So let's utilize this great information. So did you want to give any closing parting words?
Well, the only thing I'll say is I know it sounded pretty somber when I was talking about those facts, but I also wanted you to understand the historical context. We've been through a lot before, and we came together and we accomplished some great things. And I think the sky's the limit now. I think we just got to get a bunch of people to be willing to get their hands dirty and understand that change begins with us.
That's great. So, ladies and gentlemen, we enjoyed you all, and we
Yes,
look forward
indeed.
to seeing you next week. We're going to have a surprise next week. So, you got to show up to find out what it is.
Right.
Well, thank you all.
Y'all
Right.
have a
And
good night.
one of the
Enjoyed
parting
it.
things, one of the parting things I want to add is
Okay.
Dr. DeMel Colvin did say this, and I want you to let this resonate in your spirit as you go for tonight and tomorrow and the weekend. You can't get right until you get real. I love that
Mm.
tag. You can't get right until you get real. So let's get real, folks, so we can get right. Have a good night. Happy Valentine's Day, ladies. And we'll see y'all next week. Thank you, Doc.
For real.
Hey, thank
Peace
you.
out.
Take